Hi, I'm Bruce Eckel,
And I'm James Ward.
and this is First Steps in Flex, and we're going to look at styling and skinning. I think one of the compelling things about Flex and Flash is the ability to make virtually any look that you want. So how do you do that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to customize the look and feel of components. There's really three different levels of customization that you can do on all of the visual components, really. The first one is that you can set CSS styles on components.
And is that just ordinary CSS that we learned for using with HTML?
Very similar. It's not the exact same because it has to fit into an object-oriented model, but essentially, yes, it is cascading and it is setting style information. So CSS styling is the most basic way, and there's a number of different ways to do CSS styling, so we'll walk through those. And then the next level down is to do graphical skinning. And with graphical skinning, we actually completely replace the look and feel of a Flex component with some bitmap asset.
And so the component has some sort of hook that allows you to stick stuff in like that?
Exactly. Yep. And then the third is to completely change the skin by doing some kind of vector drawing to describe what the look is. So we can do the graphics API, which we learned about, I think it was last chapter, or we can use like Degrapha or some other way to define declaratively the graphic way of displaying the component.
So there you're not just hooking something in or laying something over. You're actually writing code that changes the way the thing looks.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah, so let's actually walk through all three of those different models for doing styling here. And so let's create a new Flex project here in Flex Builder. And we'll call this one Styling Skinning CSS for Cascading Style Sheet. So in this one, we're gonna show how to do CSS in a few different ways. So what we're going to be doing is just very simple styling of a button. And so the button that we're going to be styling, we can just add here, let's say button, and we'll set a label here called Inline Style. So inline styling just allows us to set the styling information in MXML. And so we can set the styling information in a variety of different ways. This particular way just uses MXML. So what we're going to say is fill colors. So fill colors you'll see indicated there by that pop-up box. It uses the three boxes to indicate that this is a style parameter. This isn't actually a property on the component. So a lot of times we're actually setting properties. Label is a property on the button component, for instance.
But it looks like a property.
The syntax looks like a property, but it's really a style. If you tried an ActionScript, for instance, to set the fill colors property, it would give an error because it's not really a property. It's a style.
I have tried to do that and have been surprised.
I was surprised as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the fill colors to blue and red. And so that's just setting an array of fill colors on this button. So let's save that and run it. So what we should see is a button that looks rather ugly because it has a gradient in it that goes from blue to red.
This is why programmers should not be allowed to do design.
Absolutely. We should be working with designers right now to specify the colors we should be using. So that's obviously one way to do it. So let's create a couple more buttons where we're going to show the other ways that we can set these CSS styles as well. So I'm going to add another button and call this one label. This is going to be button style. And so what we're going to do in this button is we're actually going to use a kind of externalized CSS style definition to set the style information. So to do that, what we do in our application is we say mx:style. So what this does is set up the style information for us. So there's many different ways to apply the style information within a style sheet. One of the ways is to use a class selector. So with the class selector, what we're going to say is all objects of type button, we're going to set these styles here on those objects.
Now, would that affect the fill color, the button that we put at the top there with the blue and red fill colors?
It could, but this specifying it this way actually overrides anything that we specify here. So it shouldn't. This syntax should take precedent over this one. So now let's set that same fill colors. And here we're going to just set those to different colors.
And now we're using CSS syntax instead of...
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So this is the CSS syntax. Okay. So now I've saved that, and let's go see that second button. That should go from black to white in the gradient, in the fill colors. So there's a number of different styles, properties that we can set on these out-of-the-box Flex components. To see those, go into the ActionScript documentation. Shift F2 is an easy way to get there when you click on an object in Flex Builder. But if you want to see all the styles that you could set on a button, for instance, you can click on Styles there, and we can see all of the styles that are specific to button. So there we see our fill colors, which we were setting. You can also see styles that are inherited. So some styles come from objects that button is inheriting from. And then there's also this thing here, CSS inheritance, which specifies whether or not if you created a CSS class selector for UI component and set the air color property, because CSS inheritance is yes, what that means is that air color will also apply to button and anything else that extends UI component. Whereas if CSS was no, like in the case of fill alphas, that means that anything that extends button, in this case, will not inherit that style if we only set it on button. So it is, these styles determine whether or not they inherit. Okay, so let's show one other way to set these styles with CSS. So let's add another button here, and we'll set this one labeled to explicit. Is that how we spell that?
IT.
Explicit. There we go. I am terrible at spelling, like most programmers, as we can see here. Explicit style. Okay, so now what we want to do is, rather than letting a class selector like we used here specify the style, and rather than setting it in line, what we're going to do is create a what we call a style name. So style name, in this case, will be ugly button. So what this allows us to do is, rather than specifying a style for a given class, we're going to create a reusable style via a name. And so to do that here in the style, what we do is we precede the name with a dot. So that specifies that this is a kind of named style rather than a class selector style. And so now let's go in and set our fill colors here. So fill colors, and let's set those to some different colors. And I'm going to set these, rather than using the named colors, I'm going to use the hex notation colors. So this one will be 00 FF00, that's green, and then it's going to go to FF00. So that's a
and
combination.
again, this is hex
green.
notation for CSS, not for ActionScript.
We could, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, because we're using the hash symbol here, that works in CSS, but in ActionScript we would have to use the 0x.
Now the style name, you're saying the style name couldn't be assigned to anything that doesn't have a dot in front of it?
So the way that we tell the CSS style sheet that this is a named style is we precede it with a dot. Mm-hmm. And that tells Flex that this is a name style rather than a class selector style. It assumes that if you don't put the dot in front, then it's going to find classes with that name. Mm-hmm. In this case, our class is button, not ugly button.
So I couldn't say style name equals button.
No, that is not a name style. That is a class selector style.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So now let's save this one and go check it out. So there we go. Now we get our style here. The bottom one is our new one, which goes from green down to yellow. So those are the three different ways that we can set up these CSS styles using different ways of setting them.
Now, normally with style sheets, you have some sort of external CSS file that you
That's right.
bring in. Can you do that
Yep,
with Flex?
definitely. Yeah, so with Flex, we can define our styles here in the MX:style tag, but a better approach usually is to externalize these styles. So what we do is we just create a new, and what we're going to come in here and find is a CSS file. So a new CSS file, and we'll call this one styles.css. And so now we can externalize those styles. So what I'm going to do is just copy the styles and paste them into this the CSS file here. And then now we're going to, instead of specifying our styles there, we just need to reference the source file for our style sheet. So we're going to say styles.css and make sure we close that tag. So now when we save that and save our style sheet, then go back and reload, and hopefully our styles look the same. There we go. They do.
They do.
So we can definitely externalize those, and also a nice feature of Flex Builder is to actually be able to go into what's called CSS design view. So there is the design view for laying out the components in our application. There's also a design view for CSS files, and so now we can come in here and see exactly what like a button will look like, and we need to tell it what. There we go. So it's going to show us now what our button will look like with the styles that we specified. We can come in and even change the styles here. So this is a pretty powerful way to design our components here. And here, if we do the name style, we have to tell it what component to display. There we see the name style. We can come in and set these parameters. There we go. And if we go back to the source view, we see that it changed our fill colors and fill alphas on that style. So really easy way to set those styles up.
Now, can you also do this within ActionScript?
We can set styles within ActionScript as well. So to do that, let's actually go create a new Flex project here. So I'm going to call this one Styling Skinning, and we'll call it AS. So now with this one, let's just do a very simple button. So let's add in here our button, and we'll give it an ID. We'll call it B. And then let's set the label to click me. So what we want to do is have a click event handler that's actually going to change the style of this button. So let's go in and add that click event handler. So what we're going to say is when the user clicks this button, I'm going to call b.setStyle. So remember, we have to do we can't set this property directly. So that fill colors, if we try to type in fill colors, doesn't exist. There is no property fill colors there. So we have to call setStyle, this method on the button object. And then what we're going to say is first parameter is the style that we want to set, fill colors, and then the second parameter is the value. And so here we're going to do go from, let's say, red. And we're doing this in the hex notation there for ActionScript, and to black, and that's it. So now let's run this one. So it's this one, we get our normal button here, and then when we click on it, then it changes the style programmatically. And that's really what the CSS style sheet is actually doing under the covers, is just calling the same API to change the styles on components. So we can get the more granular way of setting those styles through ActionScript if we want to.
Seems pretty useful. Now with graphical skinning, what? You bring in a bitmap and you shove it in someplace and it shows up in your button or your component someplace?
That's exactly right. So
let's
we actually
do that.
Yeah, let's do that. A lot of times we are receiving our skins from designers, and so we actually have this upskin GIF that we received here from a designer. And so we just copy that into the project. We could also use this wizard to import the artwork as well as part of Flex Builder. But so now, rather than setting that button style that way, what we're going to do is set the label to be graphical upskin. And then we're going to set a property here called upskin. So upskin is actually a style property. So we're actually setting a style, but in this case, instead of setting a style to some value, we're going to set it to be the image. And so in order to do that, we use this @embed, and then what we're going to embed is that upskin.gif.
So I got to ask, what's the @ sign?
The @ sign is just some compiler directive that tells it that this is not a value, this is a reference to embed this image
So that tells the
this.
compiler to go out and find that GIF file and compile it directly into the resulting.
That's exactly
binary.
right. That's
Okay.
exactly right. Okay, so let's save this one and see what it looks like. So there we go. There's our beautiful upskin. Now we only set it on the upskin, so you'll see when we mouse over it, that's a different skin. That's the overskin. There's also a downskin, and so we only see that wonderful image given to us by a designer when we're in the upskin state. We can also set this to just be the skin, which would set it for all of the button states. And now when we reload this, we can come in, and when we mouse over it, we don't see anything. When we click it, we don't see any feedback because we're using the same image for all states. There's all sorts of different ones, downskin, that we could set on that as well, and we could set those to different images.
So it seems like it might be useful to be able to use one of these GIFs in our CSS files.
That's right, and so we can do that. So we can come in and create a new CSS file here. Let's call this one actually, let's not create, we're going to create the style tag just to keep it all in line here. We could also create the external style sheet, but that's not the way we did it in the book, so we'll keep it with consistent with the book. So what we're now going to do is we're going to apply this in the same way we showed before, where we're going to use a class selector. So all buttons, all objects of type button will have an upskin property set to embed, and you'll see here we don't actually use that @ sign because this is a CSS file essentially instead of an action script or MXML.
Now is upskin a CSS directive?
Upskin is a style, actually. Yeah, so we are actually setting a style. We couldn't set label, for instance, through CSS because it's not a style parameter. Upskin is a style parameter, so we can set that through CSS. So now let's go remove it from there to make sure this works. So hopefully now when we reload, our upskin is that one, and we're back to just applying that to the upskin. So we can set these graphical skins either on the tags themselves or in CSS.
Okay, so now let's do something really fun and do some programmatic skinning.
Yeah, and so programmatic skinning just says, all right, we're going to actually write the code to draw the look of this component.
So we'd only do this when we want something really snazzy and powerful.
Really customized, yeah. Yeah, and actually the entire Flex framework, all of its skins are actually written in ActionScript. So when you go into the Flex source code, you can actually see all of the code used to draw the Flex components. And of course that's possible to be overwritten, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to create a new ActionScript class, and we're going to call this one MyButtonSkin, and we're going to extend just UI component. So UI component is just our basic Flex visual component.
Rather than extending button.
Yep, yeah. Because this is a skin, not a button.
Oh,
yep,
right. We're not making a button, we're
component.
making a skin that will
That's
stick
right.
into a button.
Yep. And so then what we're going to do in the skin is there's a method that we're going to override here called, and let's do override protected function. So it's called update display list. So update display list gets called here when this component is being, or when the skin is being drawn.
So couldn't you have just started typing update display list and wouldn't it have done completion for you?
It did completion for the method parameters, but I don't know if it would have. I don't think it would have done the override protected for me. It may have. I'm not sure. So we're gonna first call our super update display list and pass it the unscaled width and the unscaled height. Then now we can actually do our custom drawing. So what we're going to first do is call graphics.clear to clear what's in the graphics.
So that erases whatever was there before.
Right.
Which
and I don't know if
was
we necessarily
put there because of the super call.
It could have been, but UI component shouldn't be doing any drawing.
Okay.
It doesn't have any visual appearance. It's just kind of a base class. So so after we clear, and I'm not sure that's fully necessary, but then we're going to actually do some drawings. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell this that we're going to do begin fill, and I'm going to create a red fill. We could also do gradients and all sorts of crazy things. But then we're going to do graphics dot draw ellipse. So we're going to draw ellipse from x0, y0, and then our width is going to be width, and our height is going to be height, and those just come from UI component. Those are
Now,
properties.
0, 0 is that relative to the component, or is that relative to the screen?
In this
or
case,
what?
it's relative to that component.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
component has some size, and it's starting at the 0, 0 and drawing to the width
Exactly.
and height.
Of that component. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. And so when Flex draws these graphical skins on components, it sets these up. It sets up the X and Y. It sets up the width and height for the component, just to make it really easy to draw these things. So now the last thing we need to do is actually apply that skin to our button. And so the way that we do that, or one of the ways that we can do that, is now here on our button. Let's change this to say programmatic upskin. And now let's remove that style block for now. We're going to set this in MXML. So what we're going to say is the upskin. And now, rather than using that at embed like we did before, we're going to actually just put a class name in here. So we're going to say my button skin. And Flex is going to know that because we didn't use that at embed directive, that this is actually a class name. And so then it's going to go compile this class into our project. And then whenever it needs to display a button, it's going to use this skin as the skin for that button if we specify that to be the upskin. Okay, so let's save. Let's go run this one. So there we go. Now we get our red ellipse, and we only set it on the upskin. So again, we should get the mouse over should change it there.
Now, we've been able to use CSS in all of our other examples. Can you use it with programmatic skinning as well?
Absolutely. So let's go in and create the style definition here, and just like we did before, let's specify it for button. And now here we have a little bit different, and let's move it out of here. What we're going to say is upskin, just like we've done before, but this time we'll set it to class reference. So we use this class reference to tell it which class to use for the skin. And we'll call it my button skin, and save that. And now if we go reload, should hopefully look the same there, and there it is.
So class reference is a way, I guess, to tell the compiler that it has to go out and find this class and somehow compile it into the CSS.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so those are the different ways to do skinning and styling in Flex. It's very versatile, and there's lots of different levels. CSS styling is the easiest, and you know, when you work with designers, you can have them give you graphical skins and use those. And if you really want to do the hardcore programming, you can create your own programmatic skins. You could also use Degrapha to make that easier to write those skins.
So your designers could use things like Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever to create these things.
That's right.
Okay, great.